Welcome back to another breathing tutorial video. Shebang. Look at that artwork. I made that. I'm proud. I'm going to go over this with you, and this is going to be attached below this video or in the resources section. Play along with me here. I know it's backwards for you here as you're looking at the video, but you'll be able to pull this up and follow me along as I take you through this process. So, the acronym for you to remember here is BREATHE. Breathe rhythmically, evenly, and through the heart every day. I know it's not exactly perfect, but this acronym is from the Heart Math Institute. They've got a ton of really good research, and I noted them up here as a star, and also I put Alan Watkins' TED Talks. So you should find those videos in conjunction with this page, or they'll be in the resources section. But he does a really good job explaining the science of deep belly breathing and why you should do it so you can live a healthier, longer life. And I broke this down and I implemented some of my yogic teaching into this as well. So we're just going to go through this together. But we are going to be learning the 4 phases of the breath. This is often referred to as the 4-part breath. The 4 phases of the breath. But for the 4 phases of the breath, the first phase of the breath is the inhale. The second phase of your breath cycle is the pause between the inhale and the exhale when the lungs are full of air. Then the third phase is the exhale. And the fourth phase is the pause, the time between the exhale and the next inhale, starting that cycle over when the lungs are empty. So you see a beautiful little sign graph that I made here. It's just a rhythmic pattern of inhaling to exhaling. The more rhythmic and even the tempo of our breath, the slower and smoother the breath, the more we will engage the parasympathetic rest and digest side of the nervous system. So using this breath technique is a great brake pedal to bring you down from an upregulated, stressful, sympathetic state. So if you're looking to downregulate the nervous system, decrease cortisol, decrease heart rate, decrease blood pressure, decrease stress, and increase your ability to relax and recover and focus in a calm, productive, flow state kind of way, then using this breath technique will help you manually override your nervous system with these marching orders, this new information that then the nervous system can follow through with the process of downregulation and engaging the parasympathetic and shutting off the sympathetic. So you see here, we've got the inhale, pause, exhale, pause, and just goes right into the next breath. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. And in yoga, the Sanskrit that is referenced to this process, this breathing cycle, this continuous process that never stops when you're alive, right? It's always following this process, no matter how long or how short the inhale, the pause, the exhale, or the pause, each step follows the other in this cyclical fashion for the inhale, pause, exhale, pause. So the Sanskrit behind these 4 phases, sa, is related to the inhale, S-A, which means birth. Ta is related to the second phase, the pause at the top, which is life. Na is the exhaling portion, the third phase of the breath, and that means death. And ma is the pause after the exhale prior to the next inhale, which means rebirth. So birth, life, death, rebirth. The incarnation cycle that follows, just like the breath is a microcosm of a life in that way. It's that breath has life, it's born with the inhale, it has life at its fullest expanded state, exhales, that cycle comes to a close, and then the pause between is the portal into the next cycle, the next life. So birth, life, death, rebirth. Sa, ta, na, ma. That's the 4 phases of the breath. And Now comes the tempo that we add to these 4 phases. Now that we know that it's this cyclical pattern, you can see here I've got a box on this side and an oval or an egg on this side. And if you've watched the positional breathing video, then you're familiar with that oval shape in reference to the torso, that egg shape for the positional breathing. This is a different reference, but it's just a correlated visual for you to think about that egg shape. And in Qigong or Seminole Kung Fu, this is known as the microcosmic orbit. Similar to this fashion. If you were to take, if anybody's good at math, and you take a sine wave and you basically flip this over, you close this loop, a sine wave is a circle. So if you were to take this circle and break it up and put it on an x-axis, it would look like that sine wave pattern. So we've got the inhale, the pause, the exhale, and the pause, and then right into the next breath. So this we'll talk more about in the Qigong lessons related to the microcosmic orbit, related to the meridians in the body, breathing up the back of the spine and down the front of the spine. It's just the way that the Qi, the life force energy, the libido, the prana energy moves in the body. It moves up the back and down the front. And we'll talk about that more in detail. You don't have to think about that here for this reference, but just that shape, that orbital cyclical shape is a great analogy, metaphor for life and many other things. Over here, we've got the square, a box. And so maybe you are familiar with box breathing. If you've heard that term before, inhale, pause, exhale, pause, starting that next cycle again. So a square, all 4 sides are equal. An oval is not like a circle it's all even, right? And the oval has the inhale and exhale portions are longer and the pauses are shorter. So that comes down to our ratios here. What ratio do we use for the cycle of these 4 phases of the breath? The box breathing technique is a 1-to-1 ratio where all 4 phases of the breath are equal in time, in length. And this is a really common one that is taught to deep sea divers, and it's a great technique. It's a really easy one because it's just the same number. Inhale for 2 seconds, hold for 2 seconds, exhale for 2 seconds, hold for 2 seconds, whatever arbitrary number you're using. And then you can see I even wrote in here sa ta na ma, just to continue to emphasize that as a mental focus point for you while you're doing the breath cycle. It's just something else for your mind to focus its attention on so it doesn't wander and get lost and you lose your rhythm. So that is the meditation, is concentrating on the cycle of the breath and just in your mind silently chanting sa ta na ma as you inhale, pause, exhale, pause will help you keep your focus on this continuous rhythmic cycle. And so over here with the oval, you'll see a 2-to-1 ratio for your breathing to pausing. So the inhales and exhales are going to be twice as long as the pauses, where in the box breathing technique, the 1-to-1 ratio, they're all the same. I recommend and teach the 2-to-1 ratio for the 4-part breath because it makes more sense to me, and I'll explain a little bit why. As you are the hardest phase of these 4 phases to hold for an extended period of time is the 4th phase, the pause at the end of the exhale when the lungs are empty. That is almost always the most difficult phase of the breath to hold for the longest. And typically, either the inhale or the exhale are the phases that you can hold for or extend, and even the pause at the top for the longest. So if you're starting to increase your ratio to a point where the first three phases of the breath, you can maintain that count, but you're having difficulty holding that 4th phase, the end of that exhale, for long enough, then the 2-to-1 ratio makes more sense because you're not holding as long in the pauses. And so down here, you'll see I've included for you, again, it's backwards, I know, but you'll be able to look at the reference point, different tempos for you to try out using the 2-to-1 ratio. And I always start people on the 4-2-4-2 count. So we're inhaling for 4, holding the top of that inhale with the lungs full for 2 seconds, exhaling for 4 seconds, holding that pause at the end of that exhale for 2 seconds when the lungs are empty. And then we repeat again, inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 4, hold 2. You keep repeating that count. That is a 12-second breath cycle, and 5 4-2-4-2 breaths would take 1 minute, 60 seconds. So 5 breaths in 1 minute using the 4-2-4-2 ratio. And one of the research studies that I linked, should be referenced here, but you'll find it on the page somewhere, is a research study that talks about the breaths per minute ratio ideal for engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, down regulating and kicking in that rest and digest, getting you out of the fight or flight, all the things that you want to regulate and manage stress and optimize your nervous system. 4.5 to 5.5 breaths per minute was what they studied in this research study that I cited, and found to be the optimal range of breaths per minute as a cycle for breathing. So if the 4-2-4-2 is 5 breaths per minute, and the ideal range is 4.5 to 5.5 breaths per minute to engage the parasympathetic nervous system and down regulate, then that's a great starting point. We're right in that range of what has been shown to work for general population in that study. So that's a great starting point, and it typically is something that everybody can do, at least adults that I've used, women and men. A 4-2-4-2 breath count is a doable breath count for all populations. Small people don't have as big of lungs, children or just smaller humans in general. Larger, taller humans have bigger lungs, so they can typically take longer, bigger breaths. And so the 10-5, 10-5, not everybody's going to be able to do, especially right out the gate. But a 4-2-4-2, I've found everybody that I've worked with, and I've implemented this with hundreds of people, they've all been able to do the 4-2-4-2 with competence. So you'll see I listed a bunch here, and just referencing, the ratio stays the same for all of these, 2 seconds to 1 second for the inhale, exhale versus the hold. But the time can vary depending on the activity, what's the intention of implementing this technique. So a smaller breath would be 2 seconds in, 1 second hold, 2 seconds out, 1 second hold. That's a 6-second breath cycle. And so you're not getting as deep or as slow of breaths. This is a great tempo to use when you're working out or walking or training of any kind, when you need to get more oxygen in and more carbon dioxide out at a faster rate just because of the demand of the activity. Think about walking slowly and having a conversation with somebody versus like sprinting. You're not able to talk as much because you have to get those breaths in to help keep you going. So if you're doing a high, a more intense activity, then a more frequent breath cycle makes sense. But we're still maintaining the ratio of 2-to-1, 2-to-1. So it's 2 second inhale, 1 second pause, 2 second exhale, 1 second pause. Great for training, exercise, and so on. The 4-2-4-2 is a good standard sitting down, not doing anything crazy, but I'm just trying to consciously train my body to breathe rhythmically, evenly, and through the heart at an even tempo on its own automatically. If there was a tempo to use to just make your new default normal as you're sitting here listening to this video, inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 4, hold for 2. You should notice that that's a very doable breath count to maintain. As you improve upon your skill and capacity, you'll be able to deepen your breath, slow it down, hold for longer, and increase that tempo. So I included a 6-3-6-3 ratio, 8-4-8-4, and 10-5-10-5. And then over here on the side, you'll see each cycle. A 6-3-6-3 is an 18-second breath cycle. 8-4-8-4 is a 24-second cycle, and a 10-5-10-5 is a 30-second cycle. So I personally like to use a 10-5-10-5 when I'm in the cold plunge, or sometimes after a yoga class and I'm laying on my back and my lungs are fully expanded and I can really take deep breaths and hold for longer because my body's all warmed up and everything's in that really expanded state and I'm like super zen. I can really slow down my breath. That works really well for me. The cold plunge as well. You're trying to really breathe slow and controlled because it's cold. So a deep breath at like a 10-5, 10-5 or an 8-4, 8-4 work really well for post yoga or deep meditation or lying down on your back. Shavasana is the pose in Sanskrit for yoga. It just means corpse pose. It's usually where you just lay down after class or after your workout and you're trying to get your heart rate as low as you can and go more into that meditative state where the breath is just naturally coming in very slow and methodical. The 4-2-4-2 and the 6-3-6-3 are my favorite for this activity here where you're just sitting here and breathing. So regular sitting down, driving in the car, hanging out, reading a book, having it on just 5% of your conscious awareness, but making it more of that automatic breath, but more intentional and more optimal. 4-2-4-2 or a 6-3-6-3 works great for more of the exercise style breath, but still trying to help keep yourself in a nice focused rhythm. A 2-1-2-1 seems to work really well. And then for a deeper, slower, longer breath in more of a meditative state, lying down, preparing for sleep, or potentially in a cold plunge, an 8-4-8-4 or a 10-5, 10-5 works really well. So you can change the tempo to match the activity, whatever your intention may be, but the ratio stays the same. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause, 2 seconds to every 1 second for the inhales and exhales versus the pauses. And I'll leave this as a reference for you guys to check out, but you're just thinking about that process of inhaling, pausing, exhaling, pausing, inhale, 2, pause, exhale, 2, pause, inhale, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, exhale, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold, 2, 3, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold, 2, 3, and so on. And you just keep repeating that count that feels most appropriate depending on the activity. And over time with practice, that will continue to become more and more of your automatic baseline, which is again going to help you downregulate your nervous system and have overall better control of your nervous system, of your mood, and help you to manage stress. So this 4-2-4-2 breath technique is something that is like the number one starting point. We looked at the positional breath of belly, back, and belly and pelvic floor in the front, ribs and mid-back in the sides, and then chest and collarbones in the front and the top, and then exhaling back down. Now you can start to add this rhythm to that breath. So if we were to think about the 4-2-4-2 for the positional breathing, there's 3 phases or 3 positions, 3 segments, the lower, middle, and upper segment of the torso related to this video or this diagram, if this looks familiar. So segment 1, 2, and 3. So if we were doing a 4-2-4-2 breath count, it would be something like inhaling for 2 seconds into the deep belly, 1 second into the midsection, ribs and mid-back, and then 1 second up into the chest and the collarbones, holding for 2 and exhaling 1, 2, and then 3, 4 in the belly. If it was a 6-3-6-3, that's a little bit more even. So you can go 2 into the belly, 2 into the chest, ribs, 2 into the chest for your 6 second, hold for 3, 2 out of the chest, 2 out of the ribs, 2 out of the belly for your 6 second exhale, hold for 3 before you start that next inhale. And so on and so on. 8-4, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. It's totally up to you. But if the count isn't even like the 4-2-4-2 or the 8-4-8-4, the majority of the breath, the one that gets the most time, is going to be the belly. Breathe deeply into the belly for the longest period, and then the ribs, and then the chest at the top. So matching that positional breathing, bottom, middle, top, top, middle, bottom, with your inhales, pauses, and exhales. And now you can add that next layer of the tempo using the 2-to-1 ratio for your breath count. And for that added layer of concentration to hold your attention on that cycle of breath, you can, in my mind, I do this as well, even still to this day as a natural habit. I just count the tempo. Like when people say a counting sheet before you go to sleep, same idea. We just inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2. So, but whatever that ratio is, just count it out loud in your mind. And then if you want to add, for the 4-2-4-2, it works really well. Sa, ta, na, ma, to that breath count as you go. Sa, ta, na, ma, sa, ta, na, ma. Just thinking about those 4 phases: birth, life, death, rebirth. You can start to incorporate that mantra into this breathing technique as well. So that's your 4-part breath. Let me know if you have any questions, and enjoy down regulating your nervous system.